But if you think that you can't have an emotional connection to an e-reader or to an ebook, I think you're wrong. Hi Slayers, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Eileen, and in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about why ebooks are better than physical books and why physical books are really just becoming obsolete and really have no place in this world anymore. I'm just kidding. I'm not going to be saying those things. In this video, we are going to be talking about the benefits of ebooks and reading ebooks, but I of course don't actually think that one or the other is better. And you can go watch the part 2 to this video, which is why physical books are better than ebooks. Kind of just think of these two videos as a debate that I'm having with myself, where I'm basically just arguing against myself, which is really just a metaphor for my anxiety in general, but hopefully it should be entertaining and a little bit fun to kind of play devil's advocate. So in this video, we're going to be talking about the benefits of ebooks and e-readers and maybe why you should consider getting one or incorporating them into your life, especially if you've never tried them before. Or if we really want to get philosophical, it's also going to be about the digital age and how the world is changing and how we need to adapt to new technology and all of that fun stuff. But the most important thing about these videos is really just to encourage reading in any form. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the benefits of having ebooks. So the first major benefit is accessibility, and accessibility has a lot of different forms when it comes to e-readers and ebooks. And I think that their accessibility is one of the reasons that a lot of people will pick up an ebook in the first place. Reading ebooks, whether it be on an e-reader or on a phone, is a very, very portable way to use devices that you already have and to bring a book along with you. So whenever I bring my ebooks around with me, I have read 1,000-page books on my e-readers, and it is so much lighter in my hand, it's so much easier with me to carry, to just throw in my backpack, and I genuinely think that having an e-reader is a reason that I read big books, because I am less scared of them just by their actual physical size. I find that when I'm reading in different positions, it's a lot more comfy to just hold the e-reader, and this is especially good for anyone that maybe has like hand injuries or just can't hold things that are heavy for long periods of time. I'm not saying it's because we're all lazy and oh my god, I can't hold a book. It's actually because some people like literally physically cannot hold a book, and to me, reading is something that I do for fun, and I want to be able to do it in as many different ways as I can and as easy as I can. So while I may enjoy reading a physical book more because it's more tactile and a more fun sensory experience, actually being able to hold the book for long periods of time in a more comfortable setting is always going to win for me, because I want to make this hobby of mine as accessible to myself as possible. I've also been able to take my e-readers and ebooks into many different places that I probably couldn't take a real book into. For instance, like when I'm taking the bus to school, I can just whip out like my e-reader or my phone and just read whatever book I'm reading there, instead of having to like open my backpack and bring out this big book and then put it back and then get off the bus. And also, like Rory Gilmore, I love to bring a book with me everywhere, but it's a lot harder to do that if I don't know if I'm gonna have actual time to read, if I don't have a bag I'm carrying with me, or if it's just probably not a socially acceptable setting to read in. It's always good to have an ebook just on me, whether it's on my phone or a small e-reader, because it's a lot easier to carry and a lot more socially acceptable to bring to places. Other forms of accessibility that I really love about e-readers or ebooks in general is the ability to change the font size. You may not think that this is a huge deal, but for a lot of people, it's hard to read really small text, and for whatever reason, some of my books have the world's tiniest text on them, and it's not like I can't read it, but to me, it almost feels like another little obstacle that I have to deal with, and I much prefer, being the control freak that I am, being able to pick whatever font size that I want to read my books. And this is especially good for somebody that may have bad eyesight. One of the other super cool font features is the ability to turn on the dyslexia-friendly font, which basically like makes the letters stand out a little bit more and underlines certain parts of the letters to help differentiate them better. And it's just a really cool way to make any sort of story more accessible for people. And yes, I do know that there are books with bigger font sizes and there are books with dyslexia-friendly font, but the option to turn any book that you already have into one of those things is pretty cool and doesn't require you to find a special version of a book. And you know, sometimes it's just nice to feel included and normal without having to really worry about any of that. I, of course, have never known what it's like to be normal a day in my life, so the next very, very accessible thing about ebooks is the speed in which you can get them. Sometimes you just need information now, or sometimes you just really want to read a story right this second, and you can do that so fast on an e-reader, whether you just go and buy a book from like the Kobo site or anything, or if you just rent it from your library through the Livy app. There are so many different ways to access whatever story you want to read in exactly the amount of time that you want to read. And yes, I know this is probably promoting a little bit too much instant gratification, but if you're instantly gratifying with books, I feel like like there's worse things you could be doing. This is also super good for people who maybe can't leave the house super often and don't really have the ability to go to a bookstore or a library or something like that, where you can just read it right then and there with an ebook in your hand. Of course, you can't always like deliver a physical book, but that does take some extra time, especially if you needed the information right away for like nonfiction or academic purposes. An ebook is great to have. And I know personally, as a college student, I love to get my textbooks in ebook form rather than physical form because I love to save space around here in my 4-person dorm. Also, one of my favorite features about having books in the ebook format is that you can search the books. You can search books for like actual lines of things, or you can search your own annotations or your own highlights, which I think is really cool. And it's really helpful, especially in an academic setting, to search keywords or search passages that you've already read. But I also like it for a personal setting too, because sometimes I just want to reread a scene and I don't exactly know where it is, and if I haven't tabbed it or anything, I can just search like whatever I remember from it and it should usually come up. Also, a very, very cool thing that ebooks and e-readers have is the ability to have multiple books at once. So I am a person that likes to switch around whatever I'm reading depending on how I'm feeling, so I like to have a lot of different options of books for me available to read, and of course I don't really want to be like insane and spend a bunch of money on a bunch of books and then not even really like them or read all of them. So for me, the ability to have any book I've ever bought on my e-reading app, or possibly multiple books that I've rented out at once, is super, super helpful if I'm reading multiple books at once. And it's also really cool to just know that all the books that I love that I have bought on an e-reader are with me all the time, or at least with me if I have my phone or my e-reader with me. And actually I have this really big fear of being trapped in an elevator, and I'm always scared like, oh my god, what am I gonna do? I'm gonna be so claustrophobic and freak out. But one of the ways I calm myself down is by saying I have a book with me. I always have an e-reading book. I always have my favorite book on hand, so I can just read that if I'm ever trapped in an elevator. And I know that's a very specific use case, but I just love to feel prepared, and having my books with me makes me feel a little bit more prepared. It's also pretty cool that I can read the same book and the same story on multiple different devices, so whether I have my phone with me or my e-reader or even my computer, I can just open the app and I know that all of my books will be there. If you're wondering what app I'm talking about, you can either use the Kobo app or the Kindle app, or really any e-reader app should have the ability to have all of your books and sync your progress. And I love this feature because as someone that's really forgetful, I often forget the physical copy of the book that I'm reading, and then I can't really read, which sucks. But if I'm reading on an ebook, then I know I'll have it with me at all times. Now, I know that digital ownership is pretty flimsy, especially right now, since you can't download your books, and really it's just buying a license whenever you buy an ebook. But for the most part, you usually will have access to whatever you highlighted in some capacity, or whatever book you bought in some sort of way. So to me, I just kind of like knowing that all of my reading has been backed up, or at least all of my books are kind of safe where they are. I'm not saying everyone should be scared that all their books are gonna burn or something, but it's true that I have like lost a book to water damage or something like that, and so it's just nice to know that that can't really happen to an ebook. The next really big pro, for me at least, is the cheapness of ebooks. Generally, ebooks can range from like $5 to $20, where a book is usually more like $20-ish to $30, at least where I am in the US. And I do think there's valid reason for that, because in some ways books are works of art, and ebooks are kind of just these digital files that are thrown together. But if they contain exactly the same information, I usually will just choose to have the ebook instead of the physical book, at least if I'm reading a book for the first time, because like I said, I really only like to have physical books that I absolutely know I love and that I've probably already read before. And just as a broke college student, it's really hard for me to go out and spend like $30 on a new book if I'm not even sure I'm gonna love it. So it's a lot easier for me to spend like $5 or like $15 on a new book if I want to try it out. But a lot of the times I actually just get the book from my e-library, which is pretty cool. And yes, I probably could go get physical books from the libraries, but there's a lot of reasons why I prefer to read books on ebooks anyways, like the accessibility features. So I'm really glad that there's a free way to get ebooks from libraries. And then another big benefit of e-readers, and this one might surprise you a little bit, is the actual sentiment towards them. Having an e-reader or having a specific ebook, I understand that physical books carry a lot of sentiment with them, a lot of memories associated with them, and it's very easy to see that and to understand that. But if you think that you can't have an emotional connection to an e-reader or to an ebook, I think you're wrong, because I've definitely had many, and I'm still able to remember a lot of the books that I've read on my e-reader or on an ebook format, and where I took them and where they went with me, and what part of the story I was at while I was reading. And I know I talk about this a lot on this channel, but the whole reason I got an e-reader in the first place was because I wanted to read books at lunch, but we weren't allowed to have our phones out, and a lot of the books I wanted to read were in ebook format, and it was a little bit more accessible to me in that way. And even though I didn't really have any friends that would sit with me at lunch, I at least had my e-reader with me. I named it Henry, and yes, maybe this is getting a little parasocial, but I still really connected with having an ebook, even though it wasn't a physical book. And I think that I've had equally as good sensory experiences while reading on an e-reader versus while reading physical books. And really at the end of the day, it's about stories and whatever story you were reading and however important that story was to you. No matter what form I've read a book from, there are definitely some that are preferable to me, but I've been able to ingest the story and connect with the story almost all of the time. And one last point that I'll mention is that technology is always evolving, and I personally find technology evolving to be a little scary, especially in terms of AI, but using it to your advantage, I think should be something that's always encouraged. So if you've never tried an ebook, I definitely encourage you to try them, and if you are a fan of ebooks, then I think we're kind of in a good space to be ready for the future, or whatever that means. Keep in mind that I do think physical books will always be there, and I really hope that they do because they're just as important, but being able to read a book in any format I think is also a good skill to have, and also opens you up for a world of more fun opportunities and more different ways to read. But at the end of the day, I think it's good to read in whatever format suits you the most and whichever one you'll connect with the book with the most. For me, I'm lucky enough that it's kind of any format works for me, but I understand that's definitely not the same for everyone, whether it be for accessibility reasons or just personal preference. In general though, I just think reading is super cool and very fun and something we should all keep doing. And I'm really glad to have built a little community here on YouTube about e-readers and ebooks and stuff like that. So if you have anything else to add to this conversation, please feel free to. Remember to like and subscribe and to go watch part 2 of this video, which should be out next week. And I'll talk to you all later. Bye!